It's been too long since I did a build video, and what a coincidence, what timing. ASUS just recently reached out to me and said, hey Paul, we'd like to sponsor a video on your channel if you'd show off some of the capabilities of our new Prime RTX 4070 Super graphics card, which is right there. And I said, okay ASUS, I'll play your game, but other than a meticulously crafted and superbly shot build video, what's in it for my fans? They said, how about we give it away afterwards? I said, that'll do ASUS, that'll do. Okay, enough exposition, let's build a computer.
Excellent!
Let's begin, as we usually like to do, with a rundown of the parts, and these were specifically hand-selected by JJ of ASUS, and if you guys are familiar with him, he knows his stuff, and I've worked with him many times before, so thanks to him. And JJ, thanks for choosing parts that aren't just like, you know, the top-end ASUS parts, because those are nice, but we actually have a build here that is going to be a reasonably nice configuration for anyone who's looking to build something on a budget. Case in point, we have the ASUS Prime case, micro ATX case that I have built with before, the AP201, very reasonably priced case with excellent airflow. We're going to supplement that airflow and continue the set bonus with a couple 3-packs of Tough Gaming TR120 fans. And rounding out the case in cooling, we have the ASUS Tough Gaming LC2 240 ARGB all-in-one liquid cooler. But the stars of the show are going to be our graphics card and our CPU. The CPU, of course, I mean, what else will we go with right now besides the AMD Ryzen 7 7800X 3D, pretty universally accepted to be the best CPU for gaming. And that is going to make sure that we get all the frames and all of the power and all the performance possible out of our RTX 4070 Super Prime graphics card from ASUS. We of course have 12 gigabytes of GDDR6X VRAM and support for excellent NVIDIA technologies like DLSS 3, ray tracing, reflex, and studio. And if you stick around till later in the video, we will be testing this system out after it's assembled to show the capabilities of the Prime graphics card here, and to also highlight some of the features available via NVIDIA software suite, particularly using DLSS to get ourselves some more frames and some better performance out of the games we play. We'll get to take a closer look at this card as well. I like the design aesthetic that ASUS has gone with, and of course, since it's part of the Prime lineup, ASUS strikes the balance there between the performance, the build quality, but also not being the most expensive card in their lineup. Rounding things out for our set bonus, we have the Tough Gaming B650M Plus Wi-Fi motherboard. This motherboard is actually available with and without Wi-Fi, depending on whether or not you need that. But this board is pretty consistently one of the best ASUS has to offer in terms of a balance between price and performance. And because it's a micro ATX board, that keeps the price down a little bit more. And of course, micro ATX is what we want to go with because that is what the AP201 case supports. Rounding things out with system memory and an SSD. For storage, we have a crucial P3 Plus, excellent, reliable 2TB SSD, up to 5,000 megabytes per second read speeds. And then I needed to choose a DDR5 memory kit. For the ASUS Tough aesthetic, which is typically sort of a black and gold, I thought, hey, the Lexar Thor memory matches perfectly. And again, sticks with our theme today of building a system that is going to be excellent performance, but also not going to be breaking the bank. You're not going to have to pay extra here for RGB lighting or anything like that. Where did it go? The memory, it's very fast memory. And of course, it's a 32 gigabyte kit, two 16 gigabyte sticks, DDR5 6000, which is the sweet spot for a Ryzen platform. And it of course has AMD Expo settings built in too. So there's a rundown of the parts. A huge thank you to ASUS and NVIDIA for their support with this build. Let's put it all together. We've gotten everything out of the boxes and now we are preparing to install into our case. And we just wanted to give you a closer look in case you hadn't seen this case before. It's micro ATX and it's not very tall, and that's because the power supply actually mounts to the front right up here. This case comes with a single fan that's pre-installed, so that will get you up and running if you don't have a bunch of supplemental fans like the 6 that we're working with today. And you do get a bit of extra space towards the top. There's some cable pass-throughs for that, and the top here is where we're going to be mounting our 280mm radiator from our included all-in-one liquid cooler. One of the nicest things for me though about this case is the fact that it has plenty of airflow. You can see side panel here is completely made of mesh, and you probably see a fair amount of mesh in here otherwise as well. There's mesh all across the bottom for intakes, along the back, across the top, and of course the entire front is mesh too. One of the cool things about this is for anyone who's maybe a little tired or just not super into the tempered glass or clear side panel that lets you see into your case. This case does not have that, but you still get a glow coming through the mesh a little bit. And since we have a nice set of matching ARGB fans, those are going to be positioned so that they shine through as well. Next, we're going to set up our motherboard by installing the CPU, the SSD, and the memory. We're now addressing the common question of which M.2 slot we should install our SSD to. This crucial P3 Plus SSD is PCI Express Gen 4, so that's the maximum bandwidth that it can make use of. We have two M.2 slots on the board, and referencing the manual, we can see that _1 is PCIe 5.0 and _2 is PCIe 4.0. It'd be a bit of a waste to put this SSD in the top 5.0 slot. Also, since we're going to be installing a graphics card to this slot, it's going to cover the two slots below it. So by installing to the lower slot here, not only will we be putting the SSD in a slot that matches up its generation, so we're not going to be wasting bandwidth, but we'll also be leaving this upper slot open and available so that the eventual winner, if they want to add more storage, can access that without having to uninstall the graphics card. We're gonna get the power supply installed next. This has a bracket. The fan typically is gonna face the front of the case so it can pull in nice cool air. And this tough gaming power supply is fully modular and also includes the 12 VH power connectors, so we can use that natively to plug in our power supply. So we're not gonna need to deal with larger PCI Express cables. Another nice feature of this power supply that I didn't realize was a thing is it actually has sleeved cables, like individually wrapped, as you can see. So that gives it a nice finish, but we're going to plug in our modular cables to this side of the power supply before we install it in the case. That's just a little bit easier that way. All we're going to need for this build is our main 24-pin power connector for the motherboard, our 12 VH power connector. This is the PSU side. We're going to plug that in and make sure it is seated all the way and snapped in. And lastly, we have an 8-pin and a 4-pin for CPU power on our motherboard, so we're going to plug in both of these. We'll use the full-size 8-pin for one of those, and then we'll split this off for the other. Oh, just pulled off. Before I install the motherboard, I'd like to get the fans and the all-in-one liquid cooler, radiator, and fans installed. AIO came with these fans, which are tough fans and do have some RGB lighting in the central hub. Our new Tough Gaming TR120 fans, though, have a little bit of RGB that kind of feeds through the sides. So we want to keep the look uniform, so I'm going to go with all these fans. That means we're gonna have two at the top for our 240mm radiator. One here at the back will replace the rear exhaust fan that doesn't have RGB. And then we can do 3 more across the bottom. There are mounting points along the front as well, but our power supply is just a little bit too long to fit one there. I do this a lot in build videos. I'm like, hey, here's what we're about to do. And then as I do it, I realize actually that's not gonna work. The fans, the supplemental fans that we have are actually thicker. So we're actually about a 25mm thickness on the fans that ship with our 240mm AIO, whereas these are a bit thicker, closer to 30, especially if you include the protrusion a little bit here for the pads. We realized this when attempting to mount the other fan because our fan mounting screws, which are required to screw into the radiator, protrude about that much with the included fans. And they protrude not at all, so they can't bite into the radiator with these fans. Solutions might be to get slightly longer screws. These are using UNC 632 threading. I do have some longer M3 screws, but I don't have any longer ones of these, at least not that I was able to find. So we kind of have two choices right now. One is to go back to using the fans that shipped with the AIO, which seems like we're likely going to do, but since we have extra fans and I have a drill, I'm gonna see if we can countersink into our mounting pads a little bit to give us enough room to bite into the radiator. This might turn out horribly. This might destroy a fan. We're gonna take that risk for the sake of DIY and experimentation and seeing what will happen. So wish me luck. I'm gonna use my tiniest clamps. All right, here we go. I don't think this is gonna work. Yeah, I bit into the plastic a little bit. Maybe I should have cleaned off the drywall first. I have one other backup plan. I'm gonna try really quickly. The drill didn't work, so let's see if I can just cut it with an X-Acto knife.
Zero comments what Paul should be doing right now instead of this.
I'm quickly giving up hope on this ghetto mod, but at least for proof of concept, if we now stick the screw through, gave it a little bit of a countersink. There, works like a charm. So that could potentially bite and give us purchase on the radiator. However, that doesn't look good. And it's a minor detail, but I'd have to do that 8 times. So I think we're just gonna go back to using the fans that shipped with the AIO. We've done pretty much all the prep work that we can with the case as far as installing all the fans, power supply, routed cables as best I could for now. We'll cinch them down a little bit more once we get the motherboard installed. It is now time for motherboard installation. Thankfully, the case has micro ATX motherboard standoffs that are pre-installed, and it's also got one little standoff that has the extra nub on it that will hold the motherboard in place once it's where it should be. We also have a fixed I/O shield on this motherboard, which means we don't have to pre-install an I/O shield on the case. The center standoff is just set in place, so now we just need to install our screws. RGB lighting is obviously going to be very clutch to get wired up properly. We have three 3-pin addressable RGB headers on this motherboard. 2 are at the top, 1 is down at the bottom. I've daisy chained together all of our Tough Gaming TR120 fans, and then the AIO comes with a 3-way splitter so you can connect up the 2 fans that are included as well as the lead that comes off of the block, so that the block can light up as well. This should allow me to connect everything up using just 2 of the 3 3-pin headers, and that will leave 1 more open in case additional RGB might be added in the future. Probably not necessary, but good to know we still have that expansion capability. I've been working on cable management, can you tell? It's a little bit better than it was before. All right, we're gonna flip this on its side because we haven't mounted our CPU block yet. Ta-da! There's, well, it's not finished yet, but things are looking pretty nice. Things are coming together quite smoothly, and here is a brief glance at my cable management in the back. I've tucked a lot of stuff down here in the bottom left, right along some of the other channels that are available in the case. And there's a decent amount of cable tie-down points as well that let me keep things nice and tidy.
Did you cut it right though?
Yes, Joe, it's cut perfectly. A notable feature of the ASUS Prime GeForce RTX 4070 Super, and all the new ASUS Prime cards for that matter, is that it meets the performance threshold and size requirements for NVIDIA's SFF ready or small form factor ready enthusiast GeForce card guidelines. It's not ridiculously huge, basically. Being 300 millimeters long or less and taking up 2.5 expansion slots means it will still fit comfortably in micro ATX cases with 3-slot spacing like the ASUS AP201 or mini ITX small form factor builds as well. SFF ready is NVIDIA's sizing standard that will help simplify future builds for DIY gamers by removing the guesswork of will it fit. And now, the moment of truth. We plug in the power. We leave the side panel off, of course, that's a tradition, old superstition. And then I just turn the power on, and we're powered up. And the more I think about it, the more I'm wondering if I accidentally didn't plug in the other ARGB header. There's a chance. Yeah, that is what I did. Oops. Yeah, there's your problem. There's supposed to be something plugged into that. Let's give that one more try. Better. So if you didn't see what went wrong the first time, I didn't plug in one bank of RGB LEDs. I had them all wired up and daisy chained together, neglected to plug the header into the motherboard, but thankfully, everything seems to be functional now. I'm going to go ahead and get an operating system installed, and next we'll see what kind of performance we're going to get out of this system. I've now taken a bit of time to get the system set up so we can run a few tests and give you guys an idea of the performance. First, I ran a BIOS update, of course, went into the UEFI, enabled the Expo settings on a memory kit, installed Windows 11, updated it, got the chipset driver installed, and visited the ASUS support website to get the drivers for our B650M plus Wi-Fi motherboard. And of course, I installed the latest NVIDIA Game Ready graphics driver, which is currently version 561.09. Before I dive into some game testing though, I want to make sure the system is set up and functioning properly. For that, I'm using the ASUS Armoury Crate software, which I installed because we definitely have an ASUS set bonus situation going on here where we can control all the lighting with that one piece of software, not just the hardware that's installed in the system, but I've also plugged in a Strix Flare keyboard and an Impact 2 mouse, and as you can see, they're all synchronized right now with the color scheme I've selected. The dashboard in Armoury Crate can also give you quick at-a-glance verification that your hardware is installed and functioning properly. We can see the frequencies that the CPU is running at, and we can also jump over to temperatures to see how warm our CPU, motherboard, chipset, and graphics card are getting. There are a lot of functions built into Armoury Crate, like we can turn PBO on and off here. There are also fan profiles, power saving profiles, and you can set up scenarios, which means when you launch a specific application or a game, it will automatically load up a profile that you have set up for that specific application or game. If you, like like me, just want to get your lighting set up quickly though, then jump over to the Aura Sync tab where we can see all of our connected ASUS devices. And then from Aura Effects, we have Basic Effects and Advanced Effects. Since I want to move on to the gaming performance, I'm just going to quickly point out that you can turn on Aura Performance mode, which takes up a little bit more system resources, but allows you to have a lot more flexibility with the lighting, as well as enabling smooth lighting effects. And then in the Aura Effects tab, you can see they have Advanced Effects, and you can set those up and modify them with Aura Creator. That's a topic for another video though, so I'm just going to point out that if you want to set up something very quickly, I found that using the Basic Effects Starry Night setting allows you to choose two colors and maybe complementary colors, like I've gone with blue and pink here. That's giving me the look that you can see here, which goes pretty well with my new mouse pads. I also found that by going with red and orange or red and yellow, you can get sort of a flame looking effect, or you can get a rough approximation of the tough color scheme by going with orange and yellow. And now let's take a look at some gaming performance. We're running Cyberpunk 2077 at 2560 by 1440 with the high graphics preset, and that means ray tracing is enabled. And just to give ourselves a point of comparison, we're starting with DLSS turned off. But I also want to point out the performance of some of the other components in the system, like the 7800X 3D, which is running in the high 60s, perhaps low 70s in terms of degrees Celsius. So that means our tough gaming LC2 240 ARGB all-in-one liquid cooler is doing an admirable job. We can also see that our ASUS Prime RTX 4070 Super graphics card is running in the high 70s, perhaps hitting about 80 degrees Celsius max. To keep things cool, the GPU fans are running at about 80 to 90% speed, but I do want to point out that this graphics card has a dual mode VBIOS switch. It automatically ships in the performance mode, and if you do want to quiet things down just a little bit, you can switch over to quiet mode, and that's an easy way to reduce the fan speed. And here we're getting a moderately respectable around 45 frames per second, between 40 and 50 FPS, but that's with all of that eye candy turned on and not taking advantage of some of NVIDIA's DLSS features. So what happens when we enable DLSS quality mode? This isn't going for the maximum frame rate. We're still retaining a lot of the visual quality of the scene, but we're immediately getting about 30 more frames per second, between 70 to 80 FPS, peaking at about 85 frames per second. And we're still not using settings that would go for maximum frame rates. For that, you'll want DLSS performance perhaps, but I like finding the balance between getting peak performance as well as peak visual quality, and for that, we'll use DLSS balanced mode. For this pass, I've also enabled NVIDIA's frame generation feature, which allows the RTX 4070 Super's tensor cores to analyze sequential frames and game engine data to generate additional frames for smoother gameplay. You should note that there is a small amount of added latency with frame generation, so it's recommended to also run NVIDIA Reflex to ensure responsiveness. But the result here is again a big boost to frame rates as well as the overall smoothness of the gameplay as I'm running through my test run. We jumped about 50 more frames per second by switching to DLSS balanced mode and adding frame generation. Now we're between 130 and 150 frames per second, and that is going to result in an excellent gaming experience, especially if you're pairing it with one of the many very affordable 2560 by 1440 144 Hz refresh rate monitors that are out there these days. For our last test with Cyberpunk 2077, we're also enabling ray tracing overdrive mode. So here we're going to trade off some of our frame rate for peak enhanced visuals because we're using full ray tracing, which is also known as path tracing. And it might be difficult to tell from my screen caps here because they're screen capped and uploaded to YouTube and subjected to processing. But enabling path tracing is quite noticeable in terms of how the light interacts with things. Reflections, of course, in particular, but the general aura and glow as you move past different lighting elements. But because we're pairing path tracing with ray reconstruction, we're actually getting better visuals and clawing back some performance as well. And that's because NVIDIA's ray reconstruction technology uses AI to replace hand-tuned denoisers for better ray tracing image quality, especially in demanding scenarios like this, Cyberpunk 2077 in ray traced overdrive mode. With all that said, we are still getting a very respectable frame rate in this test run, 85 to 100 FPS, and this is with DLSS balance mode, frame generation, and ray traced overdrive mode enabled. We ran some additional tests with Horizon Forbidden West. This is an absolutely visually stunning game. It looks beautiful, and I just sat and watched the intro of this game for quite some time and thought, wow, how pretty. I should play this game more often. Once again here though, we have a baseline run with DLSS disabled. Upscaling is turned off for all these tests, by the way, because we don't want to be trying to modify things on the fly to hit a target frame rate. But in this test run, the Prime 4070 Super was able to manage 90 to 100 FPS with occasional dips down to the 80s, especially when Alloy jumps off a cliff and goes into the water, where there's a lot more reflection effects happening. Did I mention we're running these tests with maximum graphics settings as well? Okay, now I've mentioned that. The next test was with DLSS quality mode enabled, Again, we can get higher frame rates by going with a balanced or performance setting here, but we're really trying to appreciate the visuals of this game while also getting ourselves higher frame rates that would give us smoother gameplay with a higher refresh rate monitor. And with DLSS quality, we're getting about 20 to 25 more frames per second, about 110 to 125 frames per second, occasionally dipping down to around 105. Horizon Forbidden West also includes support for NVIDIA's frame generation technology, and in a single player title, especially with reflex enabled, there's essentially no reason not to turn this on because again, we get a nice bump up in frame rate, about 150 to 160 FPS with DLSS quality and frame generation, occasionally dipping down to the 140s, but again, the settings here with the visual quality and the frame rate provided a really nice balanced experience and very smooth, fluid gameplay. So now, with the build complete, with some testing performed, with some final nice B-roll shots of this system, I want to say a huge thank you to my sponsor for this video, ASUS. I want to say thank you to NVIDIA for their support as well. And of course, a big thank you to all of you guys for watching this video. And what better way to say thanks than by offering this system up for grabs to a lucky winner. So check the video description down below. This will be up for giveaway. You can find more details there. And the giveaway will be open for about 2 weeks. So in about 2 weeks, make sure to be checking your emails as I'll be emailing the winner and posting on the community tab on YouTube to let people know that the winner has been selected. If you would like to build this system or a system similar to it, check the video's description as well. I'll post links to all of the hardware that I used. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to subscribe to my YouTube channel, that's a great way to be notified when videos go up in the future. Check out my store as well at paulshardware.net for high quality merchandise, including our new desk mats. And if you'd like to hit that like button on the way out, that's greatly appreciated as well. Thanks once again for watching this video, you guys, and we'll see you all in the next one.